Hello, everyone. It is halfway through July today. It is Wednesday, and we have Dr. Jess Trimble for TeleHealth Telemed Day. I'm Kelly Baltzell, and CEO and owner of Beyond Indigo Pets. But Jess, we never talked about the halfway mark. We're here.
Yeah, we're here. I think I say this every week that I don't really realize what day it is until we do this and you tell me we're halfway through July. How did we get halfway through July already?
I know. And does this mean the second half is going to go equally as fast? And then we're into that word August, you know?
Yep.
And I was so looking forward to June, and now that's passed. So,
well, look forward to it next year. It's way
down. Right? Hopefully next year will not be this year. Like, let's go for let's not have a repeat of this June. So that's my goal. Let's be a better June, not a worse June. So what do you have for us today?
Today we are talking about communication as our news of the day. So it's not really news to anybody that we have to be able to communicate with our patients and our clients properly. But there's been some really interesting studies and articles coming out on the human health side, really doing a deep dive into patient trust and patient compliance and what those behaviors are on the healthcare workers side that is really inciting the sort of better patient outcomes. And so telehealth has made it incredibly easy to do this because now everything's recorded. You can go back and take a look and really track those outcomes. And so I found this to be a really interesting article that looked at what parts of provider communication led to better patient trust and then better patient-provider relationships. And the article really dove into something that I feel like most people sort of know inherently, but we don't do a good job of expressing, which is building trust with your clients from day one is 100% the best way to have long-term relationships and patient compliance. And so figuring out how to build that trust from the very first moment that that client walks into your practice or has that digital interaction with you. And so as they sort of went through all of these patient interactions, the three things that they found, amazingly, who would have figured out empathy, non-judgment, and honesty were the three main communication strategies that resulted in better patient trust, thus better patient outcomes, longer relationships, and increased compliance in taking medications, getting diagnostics done, things like that. And so while obviously this is a study done on a human-to-human basis, this is no different in the veterinary side when we are talking to humans with a pet at the end of the leash. That human that we are talking to has to believe that we are empathetic, that we're not judging them, and that we're telling it straight as it is. So in this, the empathy is a big part, and we've spoken about empathy before, but really making that connection on a more emotional level is really, really important. So, someone comes in with a puppy that they accidentally, dropped from the couch. You can't judge them for that. We've all done that. And you can simply say, oh, that happened to me too. That simple little statement right there shows empathy and non-judgment and honesty all in one. And so sharing your own experiences, especially if you've gone through something bad like that before, just that one little statement can really set you up for an entire lifetime of a better client relationship. So anyway, really interesting. And it just sort of hammers home something that we really should know. Treat humans like humans, be empathetic, be non-judgmental, be honest with each other, and everything's better. Who knew? So from that, we'll move on to the tip of the day, which is a little bit different. Alternative care models. We're seeing more and more of these pop up, and more of them in, we'll say, corporate or startup settings, because often these take a little bit more capital to get up and running as compared to your traditional brick and mortars that we know how they work. But some of these alternative care models have really taken off, and a lot of brick and mortar veterinarians or private practice veterinarians feel threatened by it, and reasonably so. If someone sets up a vaccine clinic on Saturdays just down the road from your practice, you might think that you're going to lose a lot of your patients to that. But the key there is, why aren't you doing it too? If your community has a demand for a certain type of service, you can meet that demand. If you don't, somebody else will, right? And it can be those corporate vaccine clinics coming in, or however it is. So especially as we are inevitably going to have a second wave of COVID this winter, if we ever get through this first wave that we're still experiencing, we're going to have to focus more and more on alternative care models for our small practices to survive. You might need to be able to do house calls in full PPE if you're going to somebody's home, right? Because we don't want to expose ourselves. But back at my previous job, we would provide calls to people's offices, to dog parks. We would set up in apartment lobbies, just any place you can think of. And then there's other alternatives, like setting up a drive-through at your practice, right? You know, if you have a window that's exposed to the outside where you can have people simply walk up or drive up to talk to you about requesting refills or grabbing a bag of food, so that people don't have to come into your hospital, that can be a great revenue driver as it is. It's super convenient and very low contact. And so think about the way your practice is set up. Think about what alternative care models you can bring into that, because having that flexibility is really going to help you survive if things get weird or more weird this winter. One thing that I know a veterinarian's doing, and she's having great success with, is providing classes, CPR classes, first aid classes, having puppy classes where she teaches basic anatomy. Because you know how many people you have that come in that see that extra little baby tooth and they lose their mind. You know, we can teach our clients basic anatomy and physiology, and they'll be that much more prepared when things do go wrong with their pet. So again, consider these alternative models: classes, telehealth, tele-advice, basic courses, having minute clinics, vaccine clinics, going into people's offices, maybe as an employee benefit. There's so many different ways you can do this. You can really utilize your assistants and technicians to do a lot of this work too. So think about those alternative revenue sources and start to prepare yourself that, you know, the way we provide medicine is changing, and your clinic's going to have to change with it. So you might as well start now and figure out what's going to work for you in the long term. All right, I think next you're going to be stuck looking at more pictures of my garden.
Before we get there, I am curious,
yeah,
of what this alternative care is going to come out, because, you know, again, we went through the phase of just adaptation, crisis management. Oh heck, fill in the blank, hit the fan. We all scrambled, right? And then there was the hope phase. We hope this ends soon. And we got all our emotions geared up one way, that by set date, things would be better. Well, most of those imposed imaginary dates, and that varied by human to human, right? We all chose our own date on the calendar.
Yeah.
Has come and gone, most likely, right? Or will soon. So those are expiring, which means that our emotions change, which then reality hits. It's different forms of grief, really, you know, acceptance, denial, and all of that. Then we have to adapt. And that's kind of where I think we're moving into, like you said, is these alternative forms, is this adaptation place. Well, out of this adaptation place is where creativity comes. You know, either you roll into a corner and give up for a while, and that may be part of the process to the adaptation phase, right? Part of the grief of just, I can't take this anymore.
We all need our moment. Yep.
Right? Like, we have our comfort foods or whatever that is, you know, or binging on whatever our favorite Netflix is. We have our moments, but when we come out of that moment, if we go into it, we could have the opportunity, if people choose to, be able to create a moment and say, okay, this is what is, and I can't move the needle on what is, because I can't control the world. There's so many things I can control, so what can I control? Well, you know, I have an amazing brain. I can create and adapt. If I'm willing to step out of my sandbox instead of waiting for everything to go back, which is frustrating, because then you're waiting for something external to change, to change your internal world. So then you put all your energy into trying to change the external so you can change or don't have to change, right? So instead of taking out that feedback loop and that dynamic, what I'm curious, because some people will say, screw it, I'm not waiting for that. I am going to take my energies, instead of trying to change the world, change myself, because that's something you can control, and create something, right? And come up with maybe some really cool ideas. I'm excited to see what those really cool ideas are, right? Like I heard some vet is doing a drive-up clinic through a tent. You think you were one who told us that last week. And then somebody else told us, well, that's a creative idea. She's saying, screw it. I'm going to adapt to this and make it work in a different way, right? As soon as we let go of the old and say, okay, if I release that, I give myself permission to release it. And I give myself permission to take all this wonderful energy and create something new. What is that, right? Yeah. And we're going to start seeing that in the next 2 to 3 months. Because, first people have to create it, and then it has to percolate up to others so that they hear and see it.
Yep, absolutely. Lean startup method is something that I really adore, but this is what every clinic should be applying to their life right now. It's literally learn, build, measure, learn, build, measure, learn, build, measure, right? You're learning now that the way you're doing things isn't going to work for the future. But build something that does. We measure the results from it. We learn from those results and build it better again. And all you do is keep going through the cycle.
Right? But then it's rewarding and powerful, and you feel like you're doing something versus waiting for something, right?
Yep. Nobody's going to come rescue us. We have to rescue ourselves. And you're right. It's going to take a lot of creativity and some willpower to get it done. But I have a lot of faith that these small practices, especially, can figure it out and really just adapt and personalize, right, to their little communities and what those communities need. And I think we'll start to see that shift where there's more personalized care to that individual community rather than just sort of this blanket of everybody does the same thing everywhere.
Right. We'll see. But that's this next step, I think. That's this next phase of what is that, right? That's the really cool part. So yeah, and I try to I'm not a waiter, I'm a doer. I'm a lean into it hard person. So I want to see what people are coming up with. So
yeah, it'll be a fun few months.
It will be a fun few months. It's a good way to look at it, right? So in those fun months, you and I were talking about the weather, which is really interesting because both you and I are Midwest ladies. You are in Colorado now, but you were raised on a farm. And the old adage there that you and I know so well is knee high by 4th of July.
Yeah.
For corn, right? And we were talking about that. And I was telling you here in Minnesota, it's shoulder high by 4th of July this year because of the massive tropical weather that we're having. It's just, and maybe a lot of people don't know this, but you and I do, being raised in rural communities on farms, is you can hear corn growing. You can hear it crackling, growing. It can go a foot to 18 inches a day, which is, we can't grow that fast, right? Like that's just an impressive amount of cell structure and growth in one day. On repeated day basis too, I might add. It's just not a one-time growth spurt. So anyway, that's a side fascinating note about corn, whether you're into corn or not. It's kind of a thing. We have some growth. You were saying that this weird weather pattern has created something for you.
Well, it has created and destroyed, I suppose, created lots of great fruit. I'm drowning in Swiss chard, as you can see in that picture, and that's probably the 4th time I've picked that much. The peppers are getting big, the zucchinis like crazy. But interestingly, too, on that sort of destroyed side, I'm learning more and more about Colorado hail. Just on the other side of Denver a few nights ago, softball-sized hail was falling. Softball-sized hail, and it happens, thankfully, mostly just a little bit east of us, but I'm putting up more and more hail covers, just to hope and pray that I do not lose this garden to a hailstorm this summer. But yeah, we're finally starting to see it produce, and give it about 2 weeks and I will have a mountain of tomatoes. I'm very excited.
Do you guys get tornadoes?
I don't think so. Not here. Where we are, we're still right in the rain shadow of the Rockies. And so we don't get much rain. We do get more hail, tons of wind, and the tornadoes tend to happen like right on the east side of us out there, so closer to the Colorado-Kansas border. So we see these huge storms form over the Rockies. They skip right over us, and then they land about 20 miles east of us. So it's good and bad. I'd like a little more rain.
Yeah, yeah. We had an F3 tornado last week. That's why I'm asking. Not near me, but in the state. So we don't get many, but when they come, they come. So
yeah.
Yeah. Well, cool. Maybe I'll have some very interesting or large vegetables to show next week. I just still am up to a machete style garden in the back, so that it's just, I might have to take a picture of me in front of some of that stuff to show how big it is. It's incredible. So
yeah.
All right. Well, have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. We'll see you next week.